Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Well, that is right, my friends. The government is shut down, and Oz don't care. That's what she told me here this morning in the studio. I asked her, but in all seriousness, how big of a deal is this government shutdown? I've been thinking about this as I got ready for the program today, which, of course, is coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios here. I was wondering, thinking about whether or not this is as big of a deal to average Americans, everyday Americans. Certainly, I understand. I want to be clear here. I know that this impacts people, certain people, directly. Just like it impacts people if a certain company was to reduce its job force, the number of people working for it and so forth, or cut salaries, that sort of stuff. In this case, there are certainly people who are impacted by this. They're going to get paid. They're just furloughed for the time being, and we don't know if that'll be hours, days, weeks. Who knows? We'll see. But I know it impacts certain people directly. But the question is, for the average American, does this matter as much as it once did? This used to be something that nobody wanted to touch and get into because they didn't want the political responsibility for this. But we've entered into an era that I find myself wondering if many of the average Americans realize that this is just what it's going to look like. The landscape of the battle that we are having politically is going to include this sort of stuff, government shutdowns. I wonder if that's what the average American is thinking. And plus, given what we've been subjected to over the past half century and what we have to do to fight to get out of that mess, I think a lot of Americans are saying this is this is par for the course. Now, certainly people want to avoid it. We'd like to not get to this point. We'd like to have a government that can operate without having to shut itself down. But I think it's lost a lot of that the fear, I guess, that was associated with it in years past. There's still, people view this negatively. I don't want to completely dismiss that, but I find myself wondering to what degree this is really an impact in the minds of average, everyday Americans. We'll get into this today, my friends, talking government shutdown. Before we do that, though, let me ask you if you ever wished that you had a whole team to help you manage your financial life. That sounds good, doesn't it? That's the beauty of family office services at Full Suite Wealth. Their experienced advisors bring together strategies from high-level investment management that includes private equity, private credit, option strategies, to complex legal needs, all customized for you, my friends. It's like having a family office just for you with people who know your story and your goals. If you're serious about planning for the long haul, check them out. FullSuiteWealth.com is the website. That's FullSuiteWealth.com. Build your legacy, secure your future, my friends, with Jason and his team at Full Suite Wealth. All right, let's talk about the facts here with this government shutdown, because there's a lot of information going on that's circulating out there. The Republicans, the Democrats, the media, they're all jockeying for control of this narrative to remind you of a quote from Rahm Emanuel of Chicago. He's a political leader there. He was in the Obama administration. Never let a crisis go to waste, right? There's always an opportunity to politicize it. That's how the left looks at this, my friends. And so that's what's happening here. There's an opportunity for them to gain, both sides, candidly, And you try to cut down to the truth, the core of what needs to be done here. And that's what we're going to try to do today. But both sides are trying to spin this to give themselves a favorable political outcome here. The Democrats are looking for any opportunity to get some traction whatsoever because they have, they've totally turned into an absolute and utter debacle and shameless train wreck over there. But here are the facts. These the facts, my friends. September 27th, 28th, the House Republicans passed a clean continuing resolution. You'll hear people refer to this as a clean CR. That extended funding, this is important. This is a fact. The Todd Huff Show is fact-checking this for you, and I'd say in real time, although I've done the preparation before. But it extends funding. This bill that the Democrats in the Senate, that Chuck Schumer and the Democrats in the Senate rejected, this bill was a clean CR that extends funding at their current levels through or until November 21st. Here in, what is that, 6, 7, 8 weeks from now. So up until basically Thanksgiving, there was a bill that passed the House. It was like 217 to 212, I believe is what it was. So it barely passed. It passed with Republican support. Democrats voted against this in the House. They stopped it in the Senate. This is what caused the government to shut down. Now, what is a clean CR, a clean continuing resolution? This is a stopgap bill. A stopgap bill that is designed to keep the government funded without any other sorts of add-ons like policy riders or cuts or changes regarding just the legislation. This is just a bill, a clean CR that says we'll continue funding. Basically, we're going to delay this fight that we're having. We're going to basically pause and give ourselves a 6 or 8 week timeout, whatever this time frame is. And that's out until November 21st. Democrats voted against this. They say that it lacked protections for things like health care subsidies. Now, that's the point of a CR. A CR, a clean CR, is to say, let's continue just as we are. No other changes. Let's continue the negotiations. Let's continue the process of trying to pass something that extends or basically keeps the government open for a longer period of time. And that's the purpose of the longer piece of legislation that could include these other changes and permanent cuts. That's what the fights are about. By the way, if you want government to, actual cuts to government funding, if that's what you want, this is what it looks like. I want to pause for a moment as we're talking about this. I remember, and I've shared this story on here numerous times. I started this podcast, this radio show. Well, the podcast started August of 2015. Radio show started a year later when we took that show and were able to get on our flagship in Freedom 95 in Indianapolis. That program started in October of 2016. Since basically from the very beginning, we have this program has run alongside of, I guess, Trump's political career. Trump came down that escalator about 2 months or so before we started this program. And so the entire time that we've been doing this program, Donald Trump has been on the political scene. And so we've got to talk about that basically from day one, and our histories, I guess, align in that way. Now, I remember going back into that history, into that the memory bank here. I remember the days leading up to the 2016 election. Now, let me tell you something. I know we've been having these intense political fights for the past 10 years now, since Trump, right? And I've gone through this. I'll briefly explain it here. The Democrats and the media are doing to Trump the same thing that they've done to a lot of other Republican or conservative politicians, personalities, whatever else. And normally what happens is the person that they're going after and attacking simply gives up. They capitulate. They say, look, this isn't worth it. I'm getting attacked. I got a family. I want to be able to show my face in Washington, D.C. Why does everybody hate me? All this sort of stuff. And they relent. And this usually works. I've gone through this countless times. They did it to George W. Bush. They did it to Ronald Reagan. Reagan handled it differently. Reagan ignored a lot of stuff. Reagan used his personality, his wit, his wisdom, his comedy, which Reagan was hilarious, by the way. Very witty. In fact, I watched old clips of some of the things Reagan said from time to time. In fact, I wanted to share a quick story, but I'm not going to do that. So, but they've always done this. But Trump is the first guy who fought back. Normally, the Democrats and the media, they raise the stakes. They get more intense going after their political opposition. And then eventually, after a time or two of raising the intensity of the argument and the debate, the Republican, the conservative basically capitulates and says this isn't worth it. Or they find something that actually takes the person down. That never happened with Trump. The Democrats and the media ratcheted up. Trump says, I'll see where you are with that, and I will raise you another step or two up the ladder, up the rungs here, and let's get serious here. You're the ones who are the fake news. You're the losers. You're the whatever Trump is saying. And so this back and forth, tit for tat stuff, there's no place for this to end. In fact, we've gotten here now. You look at the overall intensity of this country, just the anger and the rage that this creates in extreme pockets of lunatics in this country, to where they think that they're justified in murdering someone like Charlie Kirk or taking a shot at the president of the United States. This is where this has gotten because of this game. This cannot be denied. This is a part of the problem, the rhetoric, the maligning of the president of the United States, of conservatives, comparing conservatives to fascists and Nazis. I mean, obviously, if you're comparing conservatives to a guy, Adolf Hitler, who killed 6 million Jews and who tried to take over an entire continent, an entire world for that matter, then you're sending a message to the people who listen to your garbage that they had better do something to protect themselves. And if that is what's at stake, then they are justified in using force. That's how this thing gets ratcheted up. And so that's what's happened here. And Trump fights back, so it's different. And so the heat has gotten turned up so high. But if you can go back until before that point in time, which it's hard to get back to that place mentally. I remember the 2016 campaign when we were just at the beginning of this sort of behavior of where we are today and just the escalation of things. It was tense back then, but compared to what it is today, I mean, candidly, it's nothing. But I remember people saying to me, and this is what I want to make sure I communicate to you today as we talk about just moving forward with politics. But people said to me, I can't wait until this election is over and then we can get back to normal. To which I remember saying something to the effect of, this is not going to end. We have entered into a season where one of these two sides has to win. One side is trying to grow government, reduce liberty, remake this country from what it was founded to be. The other side is trying to return us to limited government, to prosperous behavior, to low taxes, to the constitutional framework of our government. And there's no compromise with this. I mean, if you have one group that wants to have a totalitarian state, basically, the government rules everything, and another side that wants to return her to her constitutional roots, what's the compromise here? That the government takes absolute control over some things? That the government takes half control of everything? I mean, there's no middle ground. We have to win this. And when you understand that, and when you understand that the other side, and I have an olive branch, I'm going to say permanent olive branch. As long as there are reasonable Democrats, I have an olive branch to you. You do not have to be one of these radical leftists. You can compromise and meet with people like me. I want to see you at the table here. You can't be sitting with these radical, unhinged lunatics who are cheering for the death of Charlie Kirk and things like that. Those are the people that are the problem with this country. All Americans, Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives, need to unify and at least say those people have no business having any sort of political power in this country. They are dangerous. They are the threat. I would wish we could get back to the days where our fights were only about whether or not we spent X amount of government revenues on defense and how much we were going to allocate for entitlement programs and all that sort of stuff. We are way beyond that point, my friends. Somebody has to win this battle, and the point is, this is what this is going to look like. This is one example. This is not going away. Shutdowns, intense debates, having the other side try to define who we are and to misrepresent what we say and stand for. This is what it's going to look like. We have to win this battle. It's being fought on multiple fronts, as we talk about with the 7 pillars of propaganda, but we are particularly and specifically right now talking about the government. And people thought after the 2016 election, we were going to make our choice for president and that we were going to, as a country, by and large, be able to go back and work together and get over the intensity. That never happened. It's only been ratcheted up since then, and it's not going to change unless or until one of the two sides actually wins the argument. The problem is, if the side of the statists win the argument, you're never going to appease or satisfy those of us who believe in God-given liberty. We will never just simply roll over and say we accept that. We will never say you have authority over us in these areas, that we are sovereign in our decision-making and abilities to live our own lives. You're never going to see that. So the only way really to win this is to get the people who are the statists out of office and to defeat them in the public square. It's one of the reasons why this program exists. So, much more to say about this as this pertains to the government shutdown. Friends, I want to tell you, Red, White, and Brand is here to help you put your logo on almost anything. The truth is, you can probably get your logo on anything, but you never know if there's something that you might need that Red, White, and Brand cannot get your logo on. Red, White, and Brand can get your logo on apparel, on drinkware, on promotional products, premiums, on trade show graphics, displays, signage, you name it. Red, White, and Brand is here to help you. And they're a conservative company. In fact, it's a wing and division here of the Todd Huff Show. And it's something that we take great pride in supporting the conservative movement, supporting truth. RedWhiteandBrand.com is the website. You can shop there, check around as some of the things that you can get. There's an incredible number of products that you can get there at RedWhiteandBrand.com. Use promo code Todd. You're going to save 10% on your first purchase. RedWhiteandBrand.com. Your logo on almost anything, promo code Todd will save you 10%. All right, so let's get back to the continuing resolution, the government shutdown. So the House Republicans passed a clean CR. We mentioned that at the top. It provided funding through November 21st so we could have these larger debates about what government was going to be spending money on and not have to do this during a government shutdown. The Democrats blocked it, as I said, stating that it didn't lack protections for things like health care subsidies, which is interesting because the bill didn't change anything that was happening right now. The debate about those things, basically the Republicans said we're going to extend the deadline for whatever it is, 6 or 8 weeks, and not have anything else in this particular bill. We're just going to extend the deadline. It's like going into overtime. We watched the Indiana Fever last night lose their final playoff game. Now, I'm not a huge fan of this anymore. I like Caitlin Clark, and actually I like a couple of the players on the Fever. I'm not a big fan. of the WNBA. You will catch me watching 0 of the finals games. I might watch them with my daughters, but of my own interest, there's a 0% chance I have any interest in that. However, the game went to overtime. That's why I'm mentioning this. The game went to overtime, meaning it was tied at whatever it was, 84 or something like that at the end of regulation. And they extended the game by 5 minutes. That's what overtime is. That's effectively what this extension is, this clean CR that the Democrats rejected. So as of midnight this morning, October 1st, the government shut down. The shutdown began when the Democrats refused to support this piece of legislation. So, essential services, things like military operations, Social Security, Medicare, those all continue. A lot of federal workers are going to be furloughed. You would have heard if you listened to the program yesterday, which you should, by the way. But if you heard the program yesterday, you would have heard me mention something briefly in there that said President Trump is actually considering riffing or trying to riff staff, employees. I'm not saying all of them, but whatever they think the reduction in force, that's what RIF stands for, reduction in force. Whatever they think the actual amount of riffing necessary to get the government to the right size, the administrative state to the right size, or heading in that direction anyway, that's what they're considering doing instead of furloughing. Furloughing just basically means they're on basically pause as an employee. Riffing means you're done, you're terminated. And so there's going to be an effort here to try to riff, I think, it's a little bit unclear as to what they can do and so forth, but the process of riffing has already started, and this might, in a strange way, give the Republicans, or Trump I should say, an opportunity to say, look, if you've cut funding, if we don't have funding, then I'm no longer obligated to have employees in these particular departments if there's no budget for them. You had your opportunity to come to an agreement on this. You didn't. So I'm going to, instead of temporarily furlough, I'm going to permanently RIF. That is a possibility. We'll see where this goes. But Trump has already ordered agencies to prepare RIFs. That's permanent job cuts in addition to the furloughs. So that's where I want to stop here. I'm at the end of the segment here. That's a good place to stop, tie it up, come back after the break, my friends. So a quick timeout is in order. You're listening here to the home of conservative, not bitter talk. I am your host, the one and only Todd Huff. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Continuing this discussion today about the government shutdown. What are your thoughts, by the way? Is this troubling to you because you don't like the idea of the government shutting down? Is this troubling to you because the jokers in Washington, D.C. cannot legislate as they should to keep things open? Is this troubling to you because you're directly impacted by this? Is this troubling to you because you're just sick and tired of the shenanigans? Or is this something that you see as just another example of what is going to happen as we go about engaging in this cold civil war here in this nation, as we fight about very important issues regarding, well, really what the government does, what its role is, even though it's clearly defined in the Constitution. We've got, huge swaths of Americans that haven't ever read the document, don't know what's in the document. So, of course, these folks who are leading us in our nation's capital, politically speaking anyway, can direct us any way that they want, and half of America, 2/3 of America, doesn't have an idea what's even constitutional to begin with. So, where do you come down on this? I'm interested. You can always, by the way, email Todd at toddhuffshow.com, or you can text. This number might be changing, I'm not sure, but right now, you can still text 317-210-2830, thoughts, questions, feedback, all of that stuff. Be sure to include the appropriate amounts of adoration and praise, my friends. Anyway, so program brought to you by our friends at 4-8 Financial. as well. Let's face it, there are a lot of companies out there that do not share your Christian values. The good news is that you do not have to invest in them. I know some people think that you do, but you don't. At 48 Financial, they specialize in biblically responsible investing. In fact, if you've got someone who's told you that you have to invest in these companies who are promoting ideas that are antithetical to what you believe in, it might be a time to reconsider who you're working with, because it's simply not the case today. It might have been the case a little bit in our, in the history, behind us, in the times behind us, but not today, my friends. 48 Financial will help you screen out companies that go against your faith, your values, and create a plan that is tailored to your goals. They'll do all the heavy lifting for you so that you can focus on what really matters. All you have to do is take the first step of going to 48financial.com/Todd, 48financial.com/Todd, and completing an assessment. They will then take that assessment and help determine to what extent your current investments align with your values. 48financial.com/Todd. That's 48financial.com/Todd. It's quick and easy, my friends. I did it. You can too. 48 Financial, because our values matter, and so does our money. All right, let's get back to it here, my friends. When I dropped off or left off last segment, I was talking about the facts of the case, which are being of the shutdown, which are being misrepresented as usual in the media. They want you to believe that the Republicans are the ones who are doing the shenanigans. I'm not saying that that's never the case. I'm not a party first kind of guy, but I will tell you that in this case, the Democrats were offered a clean CR, a clean resolution that they could have signed on to that just would have extended the argument, the debate about these policies and things until November 21st. But they didn't want to get on board with that because they're trying to run out the clock here. They're hoping to get some sort of traction to give them momentum heading into the midterms so that they can stop Trump and Republicans in 2020, after the 2026 midterms. Republicans are trying to prevent that. It's a very, very close, it's close in both the House and the Senate, particularly the House. That could be flipped coming up in this election. And so they're hoping for traction, delay in the meantime to prevent Trump from doing whatever it is he's trying to accomplish, whatever he was candidly elected to do. That doesn't sound very democratic, by the way, to me. But nonetheless, here's the argument from the radical left. They say that the shutdown is the Republicans taking hostages. They said that the clean CR argument was not genuine, and that they are not entering in, the Republicans are not entering into good faith negotiations. They call some of the Republican agenda items extreme agenda, including things pertaining to the border, immigration, asylum, and other cuts, spending cuts that Republicans, and by the way, many Americans, are in favor of. They also say that this talk about Trump's RIFs are unprecedented, they're unlawful, they say they're cruel, and that the government, funding the government, should be a basic duty, not a bargaining chip. That's their position. Now, Republicans say, listen, we offered you a clean CR, which they did. Democrats, you blocked this. The clean CR would have simply extended the amount of time that we could have these negotiations. Why are you saying that we are not entering into good faith negotiations? We're doing this by definition by simply extending things status quo through November 21st, but you rejected that because you wanted a narrative. Our debt, our inflation, we have to bring these things under control. I mean, what are we at? 36 some trillion dollars in debt. We cannot continue on this path, my friends. I know, we're removed from this. We're insulated from this. We've been blessed by having this country that's just a model for the world in one sense. In another sense, there are massive fundamental problems in this country, not because of the ideas upon which this country was built upon, but because of the way she has been managed. Because of these jokers that are in Washington, D.C., because of these jokers who are running the bureaucratic state. This has gotten out of control. You cannot turn a blind eye to debt and just spending in general. We've got to get a hold on this. The border crisis is urgent. We've made incredible strides. Trump has made incredible strides on the border security and the deportation of people who aren't supposed to be here. But we have to continue to make sure that that border is secure, that we continue to take steps to protect, I should say, our sovereignty, our national sovereignty. I mean, there are all sorts of alarm bells going off out there around this country about these sleeper cells, these terrorist sleeper cells in this great nation, where there are Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda-like operatives who are believed to have come into this country, many of which presumably would have come across the southern border and are sleeping and are awaiting instructions, awaiting a timeline to attack simultaneously multiple cities. This is a thing. You've seen the alert being raised at churches. No longer are we talking just about a lone gunman potentially at churches. You're talking about all sorts of things that could include coordinated attacks, that could include using vehicles to ram through things, and so just all kinds of stuff like that we have to now keep an open eye for here in this country, because that responsibility of securing this country was abdicated by the previous administration. RIFs, Republicans say, are good for accountability and to trim a bloated government that needs to be fixed and cut down to size. It's 100% accurate, by the way. And what's wrong at its core to use whatever leverage you have to get the desired outcome? We have to get spending under control. Now, how much of this is lip service? How much of this is posturing? I don't think it is from Trump. I mean, other than how Trump negotiates with people. I think Trump is absolutely looking to make our government more fiscally responsible and smaller. I think Trump understands. I think Trump has been, he's experienced what can happen when you have a government that's too big for its britches, as people in my family like to say. But a government that's too big for its britches can do a lot of damage to this country. Anyway, so that's what this fight's about, my friends. And as I look at the clock, I don't have time to... Well, I want to tell you one other thing. We haven't done a lot of interviews on this program. And that's by design. I want to come on here and tell you what I think, talk about the issues. You know, interviews can be distracting. Sometimes it's just a series of talking points and everything else. I've learned this in my course of 10 years of doing the program. There's been interviews that I've done that I've thought, my goodness, that was just nothing but someone regurgitating talking points. And I didn't like it, to be quite honest. I like to talk about the substance, have dialogue with people I agree with and those that I don't agree with. I like to share that stuff with you. And so we're looking as the program evolves, and some of the things I've been just mulling over here internally for some time. We're looking to do more interviews, or selective interviews. And I've got one next week. I'm going to just tease it now. I'm going to actually announce it in the newsletter today or tomorrow, and then we'll talk about it. It's going to be next Wednesday. But it's a big name interview that I was given the opportunity to talk about, someone who's tied directly to the White House, someone that you're all going to know. And we're going to have a discussion next Wednesday. If you want to see the announcement, and there's two reasons I'm doing this. I want you to sign up for our free newsletter, email newsletter, toddhuffshow.com/truth. But I also, when you're in the email, you can email me directly. Respond to that newsletter, say, hey, here's some things I'd like to see you ask this particular guest. So, got to take a break, my friends, along this segment. Sign up for the newsletter. You'll get an announcement today or tomorrow. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Program also brought to you by our friends at Salty. Salty produces a product that's all natural, that's good for your heart health, it's good for your cholesterol. Science has proven that it can lower cholesterol. How many times can you say cholesterol in 20 seconds? You're about to find out for me, because cholesterol is something, my friends, and one of the things that we need to be mindful of as we age. Salty.com is the website where you can go to try this product out. Get a 90-day supply. It's very inexpensive. In fact, it's much more inexpensive. If you use promo code Todd, you're going to save 50%. You're going to get free shipping. Salty.com, promo code Todd. The only thing you have to lose, my friends, are those high cholesterol numbers. Again, Salty.com, promo code Todd. Before the break, I had mentioned, I crammed that in. I had a minute and I wanted to tell you that we have a special guest next week. I had mentioned that we don't do a lot of interviews, that we're looking to do more strategic interviews. In fact, if I can be candid here with you for a moment, and I know I've gotten a couple of people that just don't, I don't know, they suspect I'm not being genuine or authentic with this, I guess. I don't know. But in the wake of the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk, I've been thinking a lot about things. I've been thinking about the format of this program. Charlie Kirk was very, very good at engaging people on the other side. And that's the whole point. And if I could say anything and just be vulnerable with you, I think that's one of the things I've got to get better at on this program. I'm welcoming to people who have differing ideas. I welcome you to listen to this program. In fact, I like that you're here. It's a first step towards at least understanding what someone like me thinks, people who are conservative think, without being misrepresented and maligned by the people who tell you that we're Nazis and whatever else, fascists and so forth. But there are so many things vying for our attention. You know, the biggest influence on this program, the biggest influence on my program has been Rush Limbaugh. There's really been three. Rush Limbaugh is the greatest influence. Dave Ramsey maybe surprising, but just because, not because of anything other than his format's different than mine. But Dave Ramsey wants to teach, and that's something that's important to me too, is that we not just talk about these things, but that we try to teach and explain things in a way that everybody can understand no matter where you're at. Many of you are well beyond having to have things taught to you. But sometimes it's good to have it explained in a different way or to think about it, differently or whatever. But I'm really trying to reach the people who haven't had this explained to them. When I put the cookies on the bottom shelf, as my good friend J. says, I do sometimes. And so that's a factor. But you have to find a way to meet people where they are. And just having a podcast that's out wherever you listen to podcasts is great. Having a website is great. Having a radio show is great. But the truth is, the vast majority of you are conservative and you agree with, what we say by and large on this program. There might be differences here and there, but in general, there's a lot of agreement. And so I want to find ways to reach out to people who maybe don't see eye to eye with me. And one of the things Charlie Kirk did incredibly well was he obviously engaged on college campuses. And so I've been thinking about ways that we can maybe take that message, take what, again, not to steal from him. This is to honor his legacy, but also to pick up where he's made tremendous impact and to say, look, here's some other things that we can do to meet people where they are who may not agree with us. And I've thought about doing things like a Prove Me Wrong series or go into more details on issues on the website. By the way, we've made some changes to the website. If you've not been there in the while, check those out. If you've not signed up for the free email newsletter, check that out as well. It's totally free. ToddHuffShow.com/truth. Actually, if you go to the website, I think it'll pop up if you've not subscribed as well. Anyway, the point is that our job is to find a way to get in front of people so that we can share this message of truth. Our message is to help others hear and receive truth. How can they receive it if they don't hear it? How can they hear it if we're not getting it in front of them or trying as creatively as possible to find ways to do that? And so that's what we're trying to do. And guests, that brings me to the guests, some guests that are interesting, even guests that I don't agree with. In fact, you remember I invited recently 2 Democrats running for Congress who are out there saying some very bad things in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death. One of them said she would come on this program. Her campaign manager said not going to do it because she's not ready for it. Clearly, she's not ready for it based upon her posts. And then the other gentleman here running for the 5th district, I think, in Indiana. We had a conversation. Pleasant guy, but he's not ready to come on either. But this guest that we have next week is a big enough name to where it's going to get people's attention. And they might want to listen. A lot of people are going to hate him. A lot of people are going to love him. But it's a big enough name to where we're going to try to, use these strategically to share the message, to get people introduced to the content. And also, we're trying to grow the email newsletter as well, which is daily, which again, I've given you how to sign up. You can sign up at the website, toddhuffshow.com. That's where I'm going to announce more details about. I'll tell you on the program here by the end of the week who it is and so forth. But really what I want to do is get as many people signed up on the email as possible so that we have a direct connection to you. You can email me what you want me to ask this person or share your thoughts. It's an easier way to do that. That's why we're doing it. But I got to go. SDJ.